Welcome to Criminalized, a podcast for the criminalized masses. I'm your host, Brian Erskine, along with my co-host, Jason Jarvis of the Jarvis Garcia and Erskine Law Firm, also known as the Longhorn Law Firm and Abogados ATX. We're not giving our legal advice, only discussing general topics. Guests have given permission to Criminalized to broadcast their voice and or writings over the air or on its social media. There are no guarantees that the legal issues discussed are fully accurate. Issues in fact discussed are not covered under the attorney-client privilege. You're advised to seek legal counsel as soon as possible concerning your legal question or concern. You also understand that most of Criminalized guests and hosts do not practice outside of Texas, so seek advice from a lawyer in your state. And have fun. Well, welcome, Mia. Thank you for joining me. My law partner, Jason, couldn't join us today. He actually broke his collarbone.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Oh, it's bad.
It's easy to do, but it's a tough one.
It's real tough. So, unfortunately, it's he's out, so it's just me.
Okay.
But I'm really glad that you came to talk to me. So, how did we meet again? You don't have to say client name, but
Sure. It was a mutual client.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you work for Integral Care Austin.
I do.
How long have you worked for them?
I have worked with the agency for a little over 8 years.
Cool. Do you want anything to drink or anything like that?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I think so.
So in that span of time, have you done different departments within Integral Care or what?
Yes, I have. Actually, when I started out, I was still in school. So I wasn't credentialed to do actual social work like direct care. So I started out at one of the outpatient clinics doing administrative work, so like the receptionist, pretty much. And so I did that while I finished my undergrad, and once I graduated, then I was able to move to a different unit and start doing like direct care, case management.
Okay. So would you call yourself a social worker? Is that a fair...
I actually cannot claim that title since I'm not
wow.
licensed.
You're not licensed.
Right.
Okay. So what do you call yourself?
Case manager, I guess.
Case manager.
Yeah.
But it is direct services with clients, right?
It is, yeah. My credential, instead of like LCSW, for instance, would be QMHP. In Texas, that stands for Qualified Mental Health Professional. So it's kind of like the bachelor's level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And what would it, do you have like a direction to do a licensed clinical social worker, or is that not necessary in your field?
Like me personally, or
just sure.
I am not ever going back to school.
Amen to that. I went to law school and I was like, I'm never doing this shit again.
Yeah. Once I got my undergrad and I was able to start doing the work that I wanted to do, I've been doing that for 5-6 years now. There's not really much incentive to go back to school, aside from getting more student loans, of course. I've weighed out the pros and cons, and I'm happy where I'm at, so I'm just going to keep doing that.
So you work with folks, I would argue, that are oftentimes in crisis, right?
No, actually.
How would you describe it?
Surprisingly, so our program is a lower level of care than, say, a state hospital. So by the time someone admits to our program, the idea is that they're a little bit more stable than they would be at the jail or in a state hospital.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, give us an idea of what Integral Care does as a whole, and then your competency restoration program does.
Sure. So Integral Care as a whole is the mental health authority in Travis County. So we have, and we're also the intellectual and developmental disability.
Just a little closer to
Okay. Sorry. Is that
better? Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. So we're the LMHA, so Local Mental Health Authority. We're also the LIDDA, LIDDA. I forget what every letter stands for, but I know that that's related to the IDD portion. So
what does that stand for? There's so many acronyms.
I know. Intellectual and developmental disabilities.
And that's the new phrase replacing mental retardation.
Exactly.
And before that, it was what?
I don't know, actually.
Which retardation sounds like an actual qualified statement. I think
they just replaced.
Yeah, they just replaced that because people started using it in poor
A
taste.
derogatory way, yeah.
But it's
absolutely.
not necessarily on its own derogatory.
Correct. I think the connotation now, though, is so we used to be called MHMR, mental health, mental retardation. And that's how a lot of our long-term clients still know us. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I went to MHMR on East 2nd Street. But yeah, we had to rebrand and move away from that because of the connotation with that term.
So IID.
IDD.
IDD.
Uh-huh.
IID is something completely different. Sorry.
That's okay. So I'm on the mental health side, obviously. So I don't deal with the IDD programs very much. I know they're very extensive. Integral Care has several programs, so many more than when I first started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you say they're the authority, are y'all a nonprofit or are you an administrative agency of the state?
We're a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yes.
So there are other nonprofits that could do this type of work, but y'all are the mainstay in Austin.
Yes. Yeah. There's that designation LMHA. That's kind of a national designation. Every county has one, and we're just the one in Travis County.
Okay. I mean, y'all really do some great work. You have offices, small little branch satellite offices right around the county.
Yes.
God knows, like all the people that come there for services have most of them have a difficult time with transportation.
Yes.
So if you have, for instance, a client that's in North Travis County, a client in South Travis County, will you go to them or do they have to come to you?
Our program specifically is able to do community-based stuff. Like I see people at home sometimes.
Okay.
There are several other programs within Integral Care that do offer really intense community services. So they, for instance, will only see folks at their home or at the library or at the McDonald's, wherever they agree to meet out in the community.
Yeah.
Because the idea is keeping folks in the less restrictive setting as possible. So if they're able to maintain and manage out in the community, we want to keep them there. And if that involves, more intensive services like our ACT teams, the Assertive Community Treatment team.
I think it's because it's angled up that I'm losing you. Let's try that. There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know how to work this thing.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Yes, so the answer is yes, we do provide services in the community as well.
Awesome. And so it's Community Competency Restoration Program.
Yes.
So when you're talking about least restrictive means, I think it'd be helpful to talk about the fact that the vast majority of people that have competency issues remain in jail.
Yes.
I mean, almost all of them I've ever had encountered were in jail for a long time before the community version of a competency restoration was even floated as an idea.
Yep.
And I've worked in several different counties where community competency restoration, meaning that they're out of jail, wasn't even an idea.
Right.
Right. I think that's fascinating that it wasn't even thought of as an option.
Right.
And sort of like the backup history of all this is we're talking about people who have issues with competency, and all of that 100% stems from mental health issues, right?
Sure. Arguably, yeah.
Arguably, yeah. Now, I'm just going to throw out a wild concept. How many individuals in our criminal justice system do you think deal with mental health issues?
I would say the vast majority.
I was going to say 100%.
Okay. Sure.
Because I think 100% of my clients have something going on.
Sure.
Whether, spectrum is kind of a good thing to think about, right? Like, where on the spectrum are they really hitting, you know? Like, is it depression? Is it anxiety? Is it just poor coping skills? Do they have, it's sort of what is the thing where you don't like people in power? There's a diagnosis for that.
Well, when you're a minor, it's oppositional defiant disorder.
Okay. I definitely had that growing up. I hate people in charge. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, I don't blame
What is it when I'm an adult? Is it just being an asshole?
You know what? Actually, I think it is kind of under the umbrella of the antisocial personality disorder, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So what we used to call psychopaths and sociopaths, the new term is antisocial personality disorder.
Okay.
So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's fair to say a lot of folks in the criminal justice system have some mental health issues. Some of them are really, really bad and disturbing.
Yes.
They have some really scary issues that they're dealing with. And do you think that affects long-term quality of life for people?
Oh, 100%.
Now,
Absolutely.
there's no possible way that I don't think you're trying to tell me there's any way that an individual's income has anything to do with their access to help, does it?
Are you being sarcastic?
I don't know what that means.
I think the more income a person has, the more resources they have, the more access they have to quality care. I think that if you're indigent, on a fixed income, homeless, I think you're up against some really hard odds to get some quality treatment.
I mean, homeless people, they don't deserve help though, do they?
Of course they do. Now I know you're being sarcastic.
Well, we have a huge issue with that
Absolutely.
here in Austin. I mean, a massive issue. It's honestly, I'm a kind of just an honest person with this. I'm not trying to soft shoe this, but the fucking arch downtown on Red River is an eyesore. It's a blight. It's a pain in the ass. And I don't understand what the city's idea was with putting that there, but it's not, I mean, I feel I have more clients get charges on top of charges by just hanging out there.
Yep.
And I say it's more than a blight. I'm not saying that the people there are the deplorables. Honestly, I think it's the policymakers that made that the blight, and that they have created a cyclical system, a turnkey criminal organization upon themselves across the street from their own police department.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? It's literally across the street. It's attached to the parking garage, basically, of the Austin Police Department.
It's its own little ecosystem down there.
And even more recently, they had the camping ordinances that we went back and forth, and they've repealed some of that now. And I heard today that they are actually going in and taking away the sidewalk at the arch to keep people from popping up camp.
Oh, man.
You didn't know that?
I think I heard something like that. They were talking about deterrents, like putting in deterrents on the sidewalks. And then all I could picture were those little spikes that people put on signs to keep birds from landing.
Right.
What are they going to do?
Oh, the benches that they have in Austin, they create them so that you can't lie down on them.
Yeah, you can't come to
Such a dick move.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what they're doing, though, is to preclude people from laying down.
Systemic oppression.
I mean, honestly, it's I see that and I'm like, I remember being a young kid and thinking, oh, these people just need to get a job and pick themselves up by their bootstraps. And of course, I know obviously a difference nowadays.
Sure.
But you see that, and you see that there must have been some kind of community effort to create the blockage to even just basic support of like lying down on the ground. It's wild. I get it from hey, we're a tourist community, and Red River and 6th and 7th Street Entertainment District. Maybe we shouldn't have a crack tree in that area. You know what I'm talking about. At the Arch. What does the Arch stand for?
Austin Resource Center for the Homeless.
Yeah. So the massive center right in the downtown entertainment district is where the Resource Center for the Homeless is. And they literally have notably a place on the property called the Crack Tree.
What's your source on this?
My source?
Yes.
My source is every police officer I've ever talked to that works that area, the vice, the judges, the prosecutors, and it is literally putting quotation marks in offense reports where my clients are found hanging out in a place known to be for the sale and use of narcotics, otherwise colloquially known as the Crack Tree. Legit place at the Arch. It's pretty wild.
I mean, I can't say I'm surprised. I have really, really strong feelings about the Arch, but in, I think, a lot of different contexts than the majority of the public. I think your point of the energy and the community effort it took to put some of these things in place, if we could just channel that energy into more positive humanitarian way, I think that we could do some actual good instead of focusing all that energy on figuring out how to keep them out of our eye line, you know.
Yeah. Well, so how do you deal with that, right? The great and powerful Rudy Giuliani and the New York restructuring of their criminal element. And I say Rudy Giuliani. I don't want to give that guy any more attention than he actually deserves. But wasn't he the guy that did the broken windows in New York?
I have no idea. I'm out of the Giuliani loop.
Oh, well, yeah. So it was Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and then a scientist, James Wilson, and George Kelling came up with that in 1982. And in the 90s, New York Police Commissioner William Bratton and Mayor Rudy Giuliani put those policies into play, where basically they would clean up some of the buildings. And the idea is that if you don't have these blights, people won't hang around it. So if you have a broken window, more broken windows comes. But if you clean it up, it becomes cleaner. But really what happens is that they just move the blight out of the eye line of the voting public. Not the public, the voting public, which is an important distinguishment.
Yes, definitely.
And in Austin, a lot of times we see that sort of in the context of what I know it as suburban isolation happens, which I think a lot of your clients have that, where, hey, the only person that I have to live with otherwise being homeless is my aunt, and she has a home in Taylor.
Manor, yeah.
Manor.
Yeah.
Sorry, Taylor's Williamson County, I guess. But Manor or Leander, Cedar Park, whatever.
For sure.
Outlier that's on a toll road that's super hard to get to.
Not
right?
on a bus route. Yeah.
Not on a bus route. And even if it is on a bus route, some of my clients they are required to do intensive outpatient treatment, right, on probation or pretrial or whatever it is. And they have a bus pass, thankfully, provided by several of the giving organizations and agencies, so they can get on a bus, but it takes them 2 hours one way to get to the class, and the class is 4 to 6 hours long, depending on their needs, and then the 2-hour bus ride back. And then they're expected to somehow be able to find employment,
right,
or pay for the food and apartment, and another way to go find food, like carrying food. If you have dependents, I mean, it's just the collateral consequences of all of this are not really accounted for when society just wants you need treatment, we'll give you treatment, whatever that looks like. Okay, just do it. I know you're going to agree to do anything I tell you to do because you want out of jail.
Right.
Because that is the lowest of the low. People just want out.
Yeah.
And it's easier just to keep them in.
Is it?
I mean,
for them, I guess.
I think from a policy standpoint,
yeah.
I'm not saying from a humanitarian standpoint.
Right.
Humanitarian standpoint, I think there's still in Brian Erskine's world of things we can do differently is treat each other with compassion and humanity. Sure. I think that's what all of us want. Yeah. But from a policy standpoint, from a voting standpoint, from a politician letting out a crazy person, as opposed to keep them in there and warehouse them, where if they're going to hurt somebody, it's another deplorable.
Wow. Yeah.
Ooh, harsh words, harsh words, right?
Throughout the D word.
Yeah. I think our elected politicians have trouble with this. I really do. Yeah. Not in the public. I think they'll say all the right things in public, and they want these programs, these community programs to work. But I think in private, I think a lot of them are worried about putting these people on bond. If they go out and commit new crimes or God forbid they hurt somebody, it's a real concern. Yeah. Especially if they got severe mental health issues where they're desperate or, I think desperate's the right word. And there's very little intervention. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It really is. I think we will solve all the world's problems before we're done today, but, so buckle in.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Do it.
Well, okay, so let's talk about competency real quick,
yes,
right?
My
because
favorite.
So a lot of times my clients will be in custody, and I'll try to go talk to them, and that really is ends up being a very difficult thing. I think it's really important to go see your client immediately. Right? If I get hired, I want to go see them immediately. If I get appointed, I want to go see them immediately. I'm required by law, if I'm appointed, to go see them within, I think it's 10 days for felonies. We hit that every time, sure. whether it's mandated or not. That's our goal, at least with Jason and I. But within 10 days, it's important. Kind of like just see where they're at. What's the benchmark? What's the what's the issue? What's going on here? And lay eyes on people. And a lot of times I'll get clients in the mental health wing of the jail, and they're babbling to themselves. And I have to talk to them through a food tray slot.
The chute, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever done that?
I have.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
It's like waist high.
So
right?
you kind of have to squat.
You have to squat down and look through this thing.
Yeah.
And you have a jailer standing right next to you.
Always, yeah.
Right? Which is so good for privileged communications or mental health issues that are supposed to be kept private.
Yeah.
There's zero concerns about that getting out, is there?
I mean, there's just so much privacy when you're in jail that,
How do you feel about going to jail? What's that like for you?
I see folks in jail fairly often. So in my current role, I'll go out to the jail and screen someone for eligibility for my program for CCRP. In the past, I have worked with different programs within integral care, and one of them was the ANEW program. I don't know if you're familiar with the ANEW program.
I don't think so.
So is
that another acronym?
It is, but it doesn't stand for anything.
Okay.
I think the translation got lost a long time ago.
So it's more like, you get birthed anew. Yeah. You rise from the ashes like a phoenix, and you're no longer a criminal and have no mental health issues.
Exactly. All caps. ANEW.
It's a new person altogether.
Yeah. So
give you a new name, new social security number.
They serve folks with mental health issues who are also either on probation or parole. So when you were talking about probation earlier, I felt that deeply because I watched so many of my clients really, really struggle on probation with all the conditions they put on them.
Yeah, probation sucks.
It's really like they really set them up to fail.
Yeah, for sure. And those probation officers don't give a flying fuck about those people.
I will say that the probation officers
there are some that
work
do.
on
the
mental health unit that we would collaborate with tended to be a lot more understanding and empathetic and willing to work with someone who's
probably that 1 8-hour training they got that one time.
I think
I'm burning people so hard today. I'm sorry. I'm like in a mood.
Roasting.
Yeah.
Did you get a snack? Are you hungry?
I ate like a huge pork chop for lunch. I'm good to go.
Okay. Right. So when I was working with folks on probation and parole, sometimes they would get a violation and get rearrested, or sometimes they would catch a new charge because they're living in really, really bad circumstances. And sometimes, like you said earlier, desperation, people commit crimes out of necessity to survive. So, inevitably, some of my clients would get rearrested, and I would go quickly because I thought, that's one of the most vulnerable times in a person's life is when they're being arrested and booked and incarcerated. So when I got the word, you would always kind of be relieved when if I haven't heard from someone in a while and I call the hospitals and they're not there, and you look in the jail and you're like, oh, at least they're alive, Yeah. So we'd go out to jail and see them. And it's always an interesting experience because I feel weird about authority figures too, to some extent. It just feels very dehumanizing, I think. Just the whole construct, all of it. I don't want to really get into it, but they're not treated like people a lot of the time. There are some good guards I've run into.
There really are.
They are. There are some good guards out there, but the system in general is just kind of paved to treat these people like they're just kind of cattle, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it.
Oh, definitely cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're told
you
where
pin
to walk.
You pin them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you walk them through. They get their head punched.
Tell them when to eat. Tell them when to sleep.
They get graded on the quality of their beef. And then they get shipped out to whatever grocery store is appropriate for them. Most of my clients are like Dollar General.
Not even Family Tree?
I rarely meet that Central Market beef, that grade A,
wow,
that good prime. They don't give me those. Now, I mean, it's really interesting how they catalog them, they quantify them, they put them in specific housings based on their threat levels, and a lot of that threat is based on their mental health.
unfortunately, that's how it's gauged. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really interesting. So I the jail is always a quandary. It's a mindfuck for me, really, because I walk in there and I kind of feel like I get, treated poorly. Like, oh, you're here for that guy,
right.
And
you always have an opinion on who you want to see.
And I end up getting the client who I have to see that's in shackles and behind all the grated wire or the plastic. I always end up having those guys. They never bring the client out to me, hardly ever. It's wild. I get a special treatment for me. I feel like my name's flagged. It's like that guy.
Well,
put you back there.
Think about it. I mean, when a person's arrested, they're not in their prime. They're usually.
But if I feel like that, how does my client feel? That's what I'm saying.
I see.
If I feel like that, if I'm going through row of door, clanging behind me, then I got to wait on another guy to clear me to go pass through another door, and then wait on. I mean, literally, sometimes it takes me 30 minutes. Just not even the sign up part, which is a whole nother thing. And I have a hip replacement, so I go off through every metal detector.
Wow.
I get every daggum time. I get the pat down. Mm-hmm. The hey, how you doing? Pat down from the guard. So it's terrible. And then I get to my client, who I'm sure has been through days of that processing, days of that conditioning. That's who they are and that's where they are because they should be, or however they internalize that. And then I'm trying to talk to them, and so. Competency. We're talking about competency, right? And according to the Code of Criminal Procedure for Texas, it's Article 46B. We were talking about this earlier. You helped me narrow that down. But a person is incompetent, and we have to distinguish between competency and sanity.
Right.
Really, it's the word sanity, but they sanity at the time of trial versus sanity at the time of the alleged offense.
Right.
So incompetency or competency is as applies to standing trial. At the time you're brought to court to be held accountable for whatever you've been accused of. Are you competent to stand trial? So a person is incompetent if they do not have, and this is the code, sufficient present ability to consult with their lawyer with a reasonable degree of rational understanding. What does that even mean?
It's very subjective.
Sufficient ability, current ability, like right then and there. And that's something that lawyers all love to argue. It's like, well, Judge, like 20 minutes ago, they were sufficiently present to do this, but now they're not. So let's redo this competency trial. I've seen that before. I've had to do that.
Sure.
Yeah, sufficient present ability to consult with their lawyer with a reasonable degree of rational understanding. What is a reasonable degree of rational understanding?
Right.
Not defined. So you give that to a jury and you say, well, what do you think it means?
Right.
And then it's on a preponderance of the evidence standard of proof, which is more likely than not.
Okay.
It's like a coin flip. It's like 51%. It's basically a coin flip.
Okay. Because I think a coin flip is 50-50.
It
right?
is, but I mean 51%.
Okay.
Right?
Got it.
That's the basically part. I'm adding the flavor of that the spicy 1% note on top of 50-50.
Got
it. More likely than not. Okay. So that they have a reasonable degree of rational understanding. Or a rational as well as factual understanding of the proceedings against them. So not only do they have to, basically it's two things: communicate with your lawyer and know what's going on in the court.
Yep.
Like, why are you there? What's going to happen? What's going to happen if you're convicted?
Exactly.
So they are presumed competent. Everybody is presumed competent unless proved by a preponderance of the evidence that they're incompetent. So it's actually, this is the biggest, like, really hardest concept to tackle. So the client, through their attorney, can argue that they're incompetent. So how does an incompetent client know or present themselves that they're incompetent?
They often don't have that insight.
They don't.
Yeah.
So it's the lawyer's duty, and sometimes to act against the interest of the client, because an incompetent client is still your client, and they might still have interests.
Sure.
Like they're mostly interested in getting the F out of jail, right?
Yeah.
All of them have the sufficient presentability to, within a reasonable degree of rational understanding, to want out of jail, right? So they all want out, and the understanding the proceedings is much often the harder part.
Right.
They don't really care as long as you can mumble and move your head up and down, yes or no. When your lawyer's present, they're going to give you that one.
Right.
It's whether or not you understand the facts of your case and the law that applies and how it's going to shake down in a trial. And how do you get somebody competent when they're in that cattle call, like plastic box where you only talk to them through the food tray? Maybe they don't understand, they don't have certainly don't have a support network. Right. So the idea of the community competency restoration is to get them out of the cattle call into a place where they do have a support network, people who can follow up with them, help them understand that they need to get their medication, they need to get their mind right so that they can appropriately address the issues going on in court.
Exactly. That's what I do.
How do you do that?
That's a loaded question. I don't know. So I try to be as transparent with my folks as possible. So when you're looking at competency, you're looking at two things, right? Kind of summarizing those two items that you read from the the Code of Procedure, right? Code of Criminal Procedure. There's the rational side, which looks at, your mental health and your ability to think clearly and to focus and to be able to communicate. And then the factual side, which is, watching an episode of Law and Order, knowing what a judge does, knowing what a prosecuting attorney does, knowing what a plea bargain is, knowing what your options are, your strategies are, knowing the consequences of each of those plea options, right? So that piece is easy. We have a curriculum.
Who made the curriculum?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I know it's not designated to us by the state. I have kind of compiled. When I first got to my program, I reached out to a lot of the different OCRs. So OCR is outpatient competency restoration, which is what we're considered. I reached out to a lot of them and asked them for their competency material because the one that I was given at our program, the one that we had been using, was really outdated. It was like the master copy was like a copy of a copy of a copy. Like there was no digital record at all. It was very outdated. So I kind of took the most meaningful parts from a lot of different curriculum and I kind of just combined it into one. So I won't take the credit for that, but I guess I put it together. I don't know. But that part's easy. I mean, we have a one-on-one class at least once a week where, we ask them questions. What does a judge do? And then you educate them on what you assess to see what they already know, right? So you're not repeating something or teaching them something that they already know. So you assess what they know, and then you fill in the blanks. Like if they don't know what a plea bargain is, you spend some time on that. You explain that. You give them a flashcard to take with them so they can look at it, that evening or something. And you kind of have to,
and plea bargains is an important part of that because the vast majority of cases are resolved through plea bargains.
Right.
Which is essentially the defense attorney in the state talking about the facts of the case and the law that applies, and they try to come to an agreement about what an appropriate disposition for the case is, whether it's a lesser included offense or a probation versus jail time or versus prison time or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dynamics involved with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that we don't, for someone to be competent, we don't expect them to know all of those things. I think that's your job as an attorney, right?
Yeah.
But they have to have the capacity to at least understand that and be able to talk with you about that.
Yeah, if you don't know who the prosecutor is or what a prosecutor does, it doesn't help for me to come in and say, okay, the prosecutor's saying this.
Right. Well, what does the prosecutor do? Right. It doesn't help.
I think a lot of people that don't have these competency issues probably don't know what a prosecutor does, honestly.
Yeah.
Most people think the judge is in control. That's funny. Love you, judges, but That's not true. Prosecutor holds the vast majority of the power.
Right.
And so that's the person you're really dealing with all the time.
Yeah. I don't necessarily tell my clients that because I encourage them to work with you. And
well, and to be fair, these are my opinions, right?
Right.
I'm sure an elected judge has their own opinion about their authority and power in the community, and would probably set me straight, right? And a lot of prosecutors probably view their jobs as kumbaya and holding hands, but I think we know that they hold a lot of discretion in their jobs.
Absolutely.
And it is for the attorney to help their client understand, because I might describe that dynamic a lot differently to one particular client over the next, depending on the circumstance.
Yeah, you have to meet them where they're at.
For sure. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there are prosecutors that certainly want to work with you when your client has some mitigating issues, whether it be mental health or the facts are not what they originally seem to be.
Right.
Nonetheless, a lot of them are very reasonable.
Yes, experienced.
And they look at that, and it's a collaborative effort for sure, but it's still adversarial.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're talking about people's liberty.
Yeah.
So it's got to be.
Yeah.
And do you talk to your clients about that?
The adversarial nature of court proceedings?
Yeah.
I do. That's a section in the curriculum, yeah.
Awesome. Because it's an important distinction. It's not kumbaya.
Right.
Not everybody's on their side.
No. Yeah.
And their lawyer should be.
Yes.
Sometimes they're not.
I know. Isn't that awful?
Yeah. Sometimes they're not. They really aren't. And, I mean, I've had clients that I don't like. Shocker.
Sure.
There are just clients that are just ginormous assholes. Right. And have you ever met somebody where you just already know, like, the body language and everything, they're just like super pissed at everybody?
Yeah.
It is super hard to come in there and be like, "Hi, I'm your lawyer. I'm happy to be here and I really want to help." And they're like, "Fuck you and the motherfucking train you rode in on, you piece of shit. You're just here to send me down the river to prison, and you and everybody is all out to get me. Fuck you, go away." Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, doesn't it?
I mean, not to me,
no?
Personally.
It's just me. It's just me, just this guy.
Yeah, I mean,
it's probably the shirt I wore when I walked in that says you're probably guilty, but I'm your lawyer anyways.
Oh my gosh. You do not own such a shirt. I hope not.
I'm one in every color. No, I mean, I go in there with a open mind.
Sure.
We're all human too,
yeah.
and you have good days and bad days, and I go in there with the greatest of intentions, and sometimes you just get into it with somebody, and you're just like, "Oh, I need to walk away."
Yeah.
And it's tough when people have the potential of competency issues. It's really tough to communicate. And what's worse, I think, for me, I guess, as an attorney, let me know, like, how would you handle this? Because obviously my duty is to vigorously represent my client and their best interest, including their expressed interest, right? And if their expressed interest is I want out of jail, obviously, don't have to tell me that, but I get it, and they want to tell me anyway, so fine, whatever. And they didn't do it, and they don't know what anybody's talking about, and the judge is out to get them, right? And that's certainly not how the court system works. So prong 2, gonna have an issue with that on competency, but maybe I can correct that. Maybe I can't. Maybe I can already just tell, few too many screws are loose for me to handle.
Meds can't fix everything.
Meds cannot fix everything, right? There's no amount of lithium in the world that will get a client to stop licking the wall, especially in a jail. That's nasty. It happens.
I read a lot of jail notes, and it definitely happens. That and some grosser things.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
This is PG.
It's fascinating.
Keep your dirty mouth and dirty stories to yourself. So, yeah, I mean, at some points, I literally, like, call an audible, and I'll just shut it down within, like, 5 minutes.
Really?
Oh, for sure. Because I want to get a doctor in there.
Oh, I see.
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because if I can get a good evaluation, I can see really what I'm working with. I'm not a mental health professional. Like they didn't teach that in law school. There is no 8-hour continued education course that's going to help you do that. It's like, you might as well give me a crystal ball and some tea leaves and chicken bones and some dice to roll. Like, you have adult onset crazy. I don't know. Right? But seriously, I don't know.
Well, it's not your job. I think it's, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's not your job to diagnose somebody, right? But it is to recognize that there's something not right. And because y'all are usually the ones that request the competency evaluation.
We are the
right?
ones. We are the ones.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be us.
Okay.
Yeah, really, it has to be us.
Yeah.
We can try to do it ex parte, which means without the prosecutor knowing, but
That seems sketchy. I don't know why.
it seems sketchy.
Yeah, I don't know.
When I was a prosecutor, I always felt offended, like I wasn't invited to the birthday party, right? Like, where are y'all hanging out together, and I'm not invited,
Yeah.
But I think there's important, especially mental health,
Sure.
right? That's none of everybody's business. Why does everybody need to know that?
Right.
So when my client has something that might affect his ability to talk with me, why does the prosecutor need to know that? How does that affect the facts of the allegations that they're proceeding under? Now, if it becomes to where my client can't actually presently understand or communicate with me, rational degree of reasonable, whatever, the standard, reasonable degree of rational understanding, then I think it does become a public issue.
Okay.
For them to stand trial. But before that determination,
Okay.
I don't think it's for the prosecutor to know that my client had a traumatic head injury and uses a bunch of drugs, which further incapacitates them and has created this chronic issue, coupled with a history of family members that have similar diagnoses. Right. It's just not for them to know.
But we were just talking about how most prosecutors, at least on mental health dockets, right, tend to be more understanding when it comes to things like that.
And they do. Yeah. And here's how I distinguish that, though. And feel free to help me do this differently. But I only do that when I think that my client's mental health. This is just the God honest truth. Mm-hmm. If it is an appropriate mitigating factor to bring to the prosecutor's attention, because I believe that the use of this information will benefit my client in a resolution. Said differently, it's a tactical, strategic decision to bring it to their attention for purposes of pulling on their heartstrings, so they do what they would have otherwise not done, but for the information related to their mental health.
Right.
Now, if that's a tactically good decision to make, then yes, I think you ought to do that with the consent of your client.
Right.
Because it's their information.
Yeah.
If you have AIDS, that may pull on your heartstrings.
Sure.
But it's not everybody's damn business.
That's true.
Right? If I have a client that is an intravenous drug user and they have AIDS and they need access to medication and help with Medicare and a clean living home, that may be very well and good and great to work with my client towards. That may not be information that they want the prosecutor to know, because the individual that might have turned them in might be a sexual partner that doesn't know.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean the facts are so unique and different across every single specific case that it's hard to on its face think about, oh, well, why would that be? Why would that ever be relevant? Right. But then you get into it and people are real and dynamic and deep and they have history and experiences. And sure enough, if you listen, you'll find out why. And there are good reasons to not share this information. There's other tactical issues, not mental health related, to why ex parte issues come up. Right. Like we asked for experts, such as for an insanity defense. I might get an expert without telling the state because I might think that that's a good defensive issue. And if, for instance, I might get one doctor that says he was insane and another doctor that says he's sane. I don't have to share that with the prosecutor. Specifically, I don't have to share the one where the doctor said he was sane. Right?
That's part of your strategy.
That's part of the strategy.
Right. And that's something that I think people on the mental health side don't really think about because we have such different perspectives.
Yeah. And it goes beyond mental health. Like we have, in Texas, we have discovery, which is the state giving over the evidence against the accused. But we don't have reciprocal, like back and forth. The defense is not required to give evidence that we know about. So, for instance, in family violence, there's texting back and forth. And my client's cell phone, we can search it and find messages on it that tend to disprove what the complaining witness is saying. Sure. I can get an expert to extract the data off of my client's phone and hold that information and get the court to pay for it. An ex parte achy motion for the court to pay for an expert to do all this, right? And the expert will come into court and testify, and I never have to let the state know because I'm not required to give evidence against my client. My client is not required to give evidence against themselves. They're not required to talk to the police. They're not required to hand over their belongings. That's their Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights under the Constitution.
Well, and if you give out all your evidence, then doesn't that kind of, you lose your edge when you go to trial, right? Because then the other side would have a chance to...
Prosecutor would say, but if you just told me about that to begin with, we would have never gotten here. Right. And then I say, bullshit, you would have found a way to argue around what we're presenting.
Right.
To confirm your bias against my client.
So you don't give them that chance by not telling them.
You have to make a judgment call on whether or not giving that information out beforehand is going to be strategically helpful for your client in your vigorous representation. So you as the attorney has to make that determination along with the input of your client. Is this a good decision? Do we hold on to this? Do we show them beforehand? How can this help us? How could this hurt us? How could they turn this against you? Yeah. What do we have to do to get this into trial? There's so many considerations. Right. And you know, like the person is not required to give evidence against themselves. So even if it could help us, you know, but we don't want to risk it, they don't need to know.
I have a question.
Sure.
What if a person has been found incompetent to stand trial, right? And you're having this conversation. My first question is, would you even be having this conversation with someone if they were legally incompetent to stand trial?
So that is a really great question. So again, you got to go back to the actual statute. It says sufficient present ability to consult with the lawyer. Right? So you always got to check in.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know, consent. That's a weird way to talk about it. But you always check in with your partner. You know what I'm saying? Like, is everybody on board all the time?
Just because they said yes once doesn't mean it's yes every time. Yeah.
And you don't know where they're at. Maybe they're starting to take medication, so you got to feel them out. Like, hey, how you doing? Like, can we talk about your case? Oh, you still licking the walls? Okay. Maybe Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to check back in and to see where they're at. Sometimes they can give you information and they don't know they're being helpful.
Right.
You know? Hey, what's your mom's number? Okay, I'll ask your mom about that.
Right.
What's your, that kind of thing. So you got to check back in. And I do have some conversations about what's going on with your case, the facts of your case, because they'll talk about facts all the time. But do they understand who the judge is, who the prosecutor is, what we're going to do in a trial, that they have the right to remain silent, they don't have to testify, that they shouldn't interrupt me when I'm trying to pick a jury and tell me that they don't like the guy in the front because he's black?
Yeah.
Not a good idea, right? Like, sit there and be quiet and let me do my job. Right. Do you understand how important that is? Right. Oh, no, you're just going to harp on the fact that when you're under crisis of mental health, you're a heinous racist. Okay, well, maybe we're not there yet, right?
Right.
So it's really just dynamic, and these are all examples of things that I've seen and gone through.
Yeah, that was a very specific example.
Yeah. I mean, you only have what you experience to work with. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So incompetency is like that. Now, insanity, let's talk about that real quick, because that's also a really interesting one. So insanity is an affirmative defense.
Okay.
So it's under the Penal Code, Chapter 8. It's the first one. It's insanity. And it says, at the time of the conduct charged, so at the time that the alleged offense occurred, the person who's alleged to have committed it as a result of severe mental disease or defect did not know that their conduct was wrong. Mental disease or defect is defined as does not, or it says the term mental disease or defect does not include an abnormality manifested only by repeated criminal or otherwise antisocial conduct, which to me, I've seen that be defined as drug use, like continued drug use. And like, I think in the old times, like they used that to justify deviant behavior. Like, interestingly, in Texas, in the penal code, sodomy is still illegal.
Are you kidding?
Well, the Supreme Court basically repealed that.
Yeah.
Right. However, Texas still has it on the books. I mean, they don't charge that offense anymore.
Right.
But it shows our history, right? And you can see a lot of these old codes interplay. At least that is one recollection of a conversation that I've had over time with prosecutors where that has been brought up, like repeated criminal or otherwise antisocial conduct, because homosexuality and sodomy were seen as disease, like mental health issues. So it's really interesting how the code plays out. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense to a crime. So when you have a person that blacks out or has chronic methamphetamine issues, and coupled with any litany of mental health, there has to be a distinguishment between like which one is the intervening, superseding cause of the conduct, right? Because if your blackout is associated with that, how much goes into play with whether or not the person, by virtue of a severe mental disease or defect, did not know his conduct was wrong. Right. Was it also severe drug use or alcohol use?
I'm so glad it's not my job to decide that.
It's a jury's job to decide that.
Yeah.
Which is really fun. So the presumption and burden of proof for insanity, they're different. Insanity and competency are different.
Can I describe the way I explain the difference to my clients, and you tell me if I've been correct or not?
Sure.
Okay. Because when I started working this job, I didn't really have any guidance from legal parties or court parties. I kind of just had to teach myself a lot of this stuff based on the curriculum and the curriculums and similar programs in Texas. The way I explain the difference, because it's confusing, and that makes sense, because they both have to deal with mental illness, but the difference is time, right? So NGRI or insanity looks at your mental health at the time of the alleged offense, right? Competency looks at your mental health now, present day. Is that the big difference?
Yeah. Like, that's exactly what the difference is. Yeah, it's the time frame. It's one, the crime that's alleged, like what was your mental state then? And then where are you at right now as we're doing these proceedings? Right. Like, do you understand what's going on? Because you wouldn't want to please somebody out who's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, it's not fair.
I don't think you can you? Like, if
it happens all the time.
It's not supposed to happen.
It shouldn't. Right. But I mean, I remember when I was first starting as a prosecutor, we would have all these pleas, and these defendants would get up in a line, like sometimes 5 or 8, right? And they'd stand up there next to their defendant, and the judge would have all the plea paperwork in front of them and go, you, Mr. Johnson, you, Mr. Ramirez, you, Mr. Gonzalez, are both charged with POCS, burglary, and rape, respectively. How do you plea? Guilty, guilty, guilty? Okay.
Wow.
And then they just go down the line. Yeah. And it's like, I remember looking at that and kind of joking to myself, like, wait, which one is my guy again? Is he the rapist or the burglar? I don't know anymore. The client looking back at you like, what did I plead to?
Right.
I'll take the drug charge.
It's between those 3, I guess.
I mean, they do them now they're a little bit better going through all the documents, and they ask the attorney, do you think your client have you had an opportunity to communicate with the client? Do you think he's competent? Now, the interesting part is that felony court is a little bit more thorough, typically, than a misdemeanor. Like, if you have a misdemeanor criminal mischief, the court will get up there and be like, okay, man, no, not like that. They're like, sir, you're charged with like trespass of a business. You shouldn't go back there, right? You're guilty, right? Okay, did your lawyer go over all this paperwork and you signed it right here, right? Okay, you're giving up constitutional rights. Okay, and we've agreed to a sentence and we're good. Okay, next, bye. Thumbprint on the paper. Goodbye, next.
Yeah.
Like, where in that is an evaluation for competency?
Well, isn't it?
And when this individual is brought out, of the jail, which is right next to the courthouse. All the courtrooms have a jail, like an access, right? When they're brought out and they're like, here's the tunnel, and I see the light. At the end of the light is me not being in jail, right? Yes, whatever. Goodbye, thumbprint. Thank you. Where's the exit?
Right.
I mean, it's an afterthought.
So the idea, the concern of competency, that should have been raised by someone before this is all happening, though, right? Like before the client gets in front of
It should be the attorney going in there and being like, hey, man, what's your name? What's going on?
Right.
So I'm your lawyer. I'm here to help you. Mm-hmm. What we say is privileged, and that's, you don't have to worry about. You don't have to worry about anything you say to me being known to anybody else. Just trying to help you. Do you know you're being charged with this? What does that mean? Sometimes I'll ask them questions to gauge their intellect, understanding. Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so you didn't actually pull the gun on the guy, but you were standing there and you went with them and you knew he was going to do that. Oh, okay, I see why you think that you're not responsible for this. But in Texas, we have what's called the law of parties, and if you go with them and participate in any manner, you could be held liable just like the person that did have the gun. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? I know you may not like that, but you'll probably get maybe a better plea than the guy that actually did have the gun. Mm-hmm. Maybe lesser culpability. That's called culpability, but for purposes of the elements, they may be able to prove that. I don't know. What else do you know about the case? What else is going on here? Yeah. What do have you ever been in trouble before? Yeah. Did you ever have any mental health issues growing up? Oh, did you take medication? Tough life? Did your dad beat you? Have you ever been sexually molested?
It's really heavy questions for people you're just meeting.
Hell yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit deeper than that, garnering a rapport with people.
Oh, absolutely.
But it also can't be a Dear Abby, like long-term sit down. I think they're more appropriately with clients that you have to maintain boundaries and barriers and state that pretty quickly and be firm. I tell clients, I'm not here to judge you, but we do need to talk about the facts, and we need to talk about the law and how they intersect. And you may not like what I have to say sometimes, but know this. I want the best for you, but I'm not your mom. I'm not your cheerleader, right? I'm not your life coach, but I am your lawyer, and I am here to help. If we need to get you some counseling, I'm happy to look into some resources. If we need to have somebody look into your past more thoroughly than the gloss that we've talked on, we have people that can do that. If you need an evaluation for mental health, we have people that can do that. Your agency has people that can do that.
We do. We do that all the time.
Yeah. So, it's important to set boundaries, but, it's also quite an interesting question of how many clients you should have to be able to competently represent people.
And provide quality care on my side, yeah.
Or effectively represent people, because there's a lot of ineffective representation.
No way.
Well, and I think it's hard to put a pulse on where that is, but what breaks my heart all the time is I think clients confess to things they didn't do all the time.
To get out of jail?
To get out of jail, for sure. That's the vast majority of it. Mm-hmm. Most of it's misdemeanors, but some felony. And really it's a sliding scale of culpability. It's not that you didn't do anything. It's you didn't do what they've charged you with. Right. Or you did a variant that's not as bad as they say it is, right? But you're not willing to stick out the fight because the fight requires you to stay in. Right. And the roller coaster that you're going to be on when you do that is tough. And oh, by the way, the tattoo on your face is not going to go over well with the jury panel that's going to come in, because the guy in the front, he's going to be like, I know you're telling me that as he sits here, he's presumed innocent unless he's proven guilty. But the tattoo on his face suggests that he killed somebody. So I am more inclined to believe that he actually is a murderer. That might be a hard hurdle to get over.
Right. Sorry, I'm kind of sick.
You're okay. So, yeah, it's difficult. and a lot of times you're like, yeah, man, I'm sorry, but like this is all we can do for you. If you want to stick it out and fight it, I'd love to do that for you. They're currently offering you time served and you go home today, though, if you plead guilty.
And then it goes on your record.
And it goes on your record.
A lot of consequences.
Oh, the collateral consequences for that, for sure. And let's talk about people who have a criminal history who then want access to treatment. Harder or easier?
I mean, I don't know, because there are programs out there that are specifically designed to treat folks that are involved in the legal system. So I don't know about easier or harder. I think the options are different for sure. There are some very specialized units that just deal with folks that are either on probation or parole or currently incompetent to stand trial. And they look a lot different than the standard outpatient clinics where the standard Joe Schmo would go,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Access to insurance, I think, is really one of the fundamental barriers for proper treatment for people.
MAP is my best friend.
Tell me about MAP.
So the Medical Access Program through Central Health. It's
get a little closer or pull that to you. Sorry. I think we can move this.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay. MAP is the Medical Access Program through Central Health here, and it's just for Travis County. And I hope I'm doing them justice by describing them like this. But they provide medical coverage to indigent folks. So people who are otherwise or underinsured. There's a lot of disqualifying criteria. You can't have any other kind of insurance. You can't have Medicaid. You can't have any kind of private insurance. There are income limits. But I help a handful of people apply for MAP every month, probably. And it opens a lot of doors to dental treatment, optometry, neurology referrals. I mean, it's really good coverage.
Yeah.
And it's free. I mean, so our folks are considered homeless because they're coming from the jail or a state hospital. So if they weren't with us, they would otherwise be homeless, right? So they're technically in that realm considered to be homeless. So they have no copays. They get all their prescriptions for free. They can go to the ER, zero copay. So it really does open up a lot of doors, but you have to know about it. And I don't think a lot of folks who are not connected with some kind of social services program, I don't think a lot of them know about it. I mean, it really is just like a public education issue.
I've heard about MAP. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it in the courthouse a little bit, but what is the qualifications for it?
Like, how do you qualify?
Yeah. What would put you in the realm of qualifying for? I'm assuming I don't qualify.
No. Right. So income, any other insurance coverage, family size.
Why did you presume I have good income? That's unfair. I'm treated so poorly as a defense attorney.
Why did you say, I'm sure I wouldn't qualify? What were you referring to?
I was referring to the abstract proposition that there are people that don't qualify, and then I would lump myself in a self-deprecating manner as a person that didn't qualify.
You would not qualify for MAP, no, and neither would I probably. There's an income limit there. They look at housing, so folks that are homeless generally qualify. And then the other insurance coverage thing. So if you don't have any other kind of private, and they can look all that stuff up. If you try to lie to them and say, oh no, I don't have, Medicaid or whatever, they'll find it. Yeah. That's part of their eligibility process, right? Is screening for all of that. So they look at insurance coverage from any other source, income, and residency. So you have to be a resident of Travis County for MAP specifically.
Which means you have to have an ID.
No.
Really? I would have presumed that.
I know. So I found out like a little workaround that on the application, there's a special application that is for community partners, which is Integral Care and other social services agencies in Austin that help folks apply for MAP. We have our own little application, and it talks about the documentation that's needed. So in general, you have to give them a photocopy of your ID, your social security card proving citizenship, Well, actually, you know what? I take that back about citizenship. I don't believe they require proof of citizenship because I know there's some undocumented folks that do get covered.
Okay.
But all those requirements are waived if you're homeless. So if you're homeless, you don't have to provide your birth certificate. You don't have to give a photo ID for the first year. They have their own complicated procedures and stuff, but they'll give you a year of coverage without having to give any of that documentation.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That said differently, who is the target audience for that?
Underserved Travis County residents.
Okay.
Uninsured Travis County residents.
So I mean, really, stuff like dental and eye care, that's huge for just most people's basic quality of life. I will be one to freely admit that even large part of my adult life, I went without insurance because I was just risky and cheap, right? But I did. I mean, it's true. And when I finally got a government job, I got some decent benefits, and I was like, yeah, dentist, that's probably good. And then I got a bunch of fillings from that masochist in the dentist's chair.
You're the masochist. The dentist is the sadist.
Oh, fair.
Yeah.
Definitions, distinguishments. That's important. The sadist,
Yes.
Dr. Sadist.
Dr. Sadist.
And then, I left public practice and went private and didn't have access to insurance.
Right.
Cobra for me was crazy. It's like
expensive,
$1,800 or something like that.
A month?
Yeah, it was something crazy when I first saw it. Maybe it was $1,200 a month.
That's still a lot.
It was a lot of money. Yeah. And going out on my own, I'm like, I don't even have a client yet. What if I get in a car accident or something? Right. It's like scary. It really was.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then you're talking about access to prescription medication. Yeah. That's a big deal. Some of these prescription pills are crazy expensive. And let's talk about people that have mental health issues real quick. Do you know what the cost of some of this stuff is?
I do. So part of my job as a case manager is to find a way for my client to access medications. Sure, they can be prescribed a medication, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get it.
Yeah.
So we have lots of resources and little tricks and things that we can do to find a way to get medication covered. We have long-term injectables. So a couple of antipsychotic medications that are injected into the muscle once every 28 days, most of them.
Okay.
Those are insanely expensive.
Okay.
Most of the older oral medications have gotten a lot cheaper. Like lithium's pretty cheap. Depakote's pretty cheap.
But that's been around forever.
Exactly. So the newer stuff, definitely, MAP actually has really good prescription coverage. They'll cover just about. Well, I'm not going to say that. They have an extensive formulary. So they do cover a lot of drugs, but there are other resources like GoodRx, for example, and anyone can use this, even someone with insurance. You go to goodrx.com and you put in your drug and the dose and the strength, and it'll just give you a list of coupons. And it's specific to the pharmacy, so it'll say like Kroger, H-E-B, Walgreens, Walmart, and it'll give you a cash price. So if you're uninsured or even insured and your copay is too much for the medication, you could still get it for a lot cheaper just by going to this website. I don't know who does that. I don't know who, where does that come from? But it's open to the public. So that's something that case managers utilize.
It's called GoodRx.
GoodRx.
GOODRx.com.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyone. I've used it.
It's fascinating how many resources are out there that a lot of people just don't know about. Mm-hmm. I wonder what, if there's any research on why that is.
I think it's just a lot of it's word of mouth, I guess. Yeah, because I've found most of...
Good thing I have a lot of my listeners are homeless people. It's pretty much the sole base of listeners is homeless people with iPads and access to internet, Wi-Fi hotspots.
I would hope
they were hanging around Starbucks, but my listeners are all boycotting Starbucks after not allowing my fans to use the restroom.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Screw Starbucks, whatever. We'll
still drink Starbucks, but we don't use the restrooms.
I think anyone who would listen to something like this, I think has an interest in social justice, right? So one would argue, or at least like finding community resources, right? So they're probably working in a relevant field, or, or involved
to then
somehow.
Point people in the right direction.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Prescriptions always kind of, it's like it's the thing. Maybe, I guess it's the thing I didn't think about. Let me say it that way. It's the thing I didn't think about and then I started talking to my clients, and I had a client that was like, well, I mean, okay, I'm trying to take, I think he was on Adderall, and he was testing hot on the
for amphetamine.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
amphetamine.
Yeah.
But he didn't carry his prescriptions with him. So he carries his pills loose, like in person. And then he gets, arrested and shook down because he looks like a person. People would do that too. Sure. And then you find pills and you get charged and you don't have. Anyways, so it was on Adderall and was also on, I can't remember what the medication was, but it was for hepatitis C.
Okay.
And for what I think it was, if I'm thinking this is the same correct client, but it was like really expensive. It was cost prohibitive. It was like a really expensive medication. Absolutely. To where it's like, well, like this will shut down my immune system if I don't take it, but I can't afford it, so I can't take it. So, and then he's self-medicating in other ways. Right. And then we had other drug issues. It wasn't just amphetamines popping up on the color chart.
Right.
He was doing a choose your own adventure cornucopia of intoxicants.
Right. As people often do when they're self-medicating.
Right.
Yeah. It's a tough spot to be in.
It really is. I think a lot of people have a misconstrued idea of why people self-medicate the way they do as well. I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, okay, so I'm going to go find some heroin and then I'm going to mix that with some nicotine and a bunch of alcohol. And then on occasion, I might, dip in a little PCP, because what I'm doing is I'm going to go sit down and listen to Pink Floyd's The Wall, right, with a black light and The Wizard of Oz on without any sound, because that's my idea of a good Tuesday.
I was about to say that also sounds very specific, like you have that in your head as like a go-to.
It was just an idea I had. I'm not saying it doesn't sound fun. I'm just saying that might not be my client's intention of using the drugs. I think people think, oh, well, you just like the way it feels, and anybody can get over an addiction, which you put people out on pretrial for drug use and then act shocked when they go out and use drugs
without any treatment.
Yeah. And there are good treatment options, but they're not the end all be all. People are going to use, and it's like, even if they want to get better, and I love it when people say, oh, you're not going to get better until you want to get better. It's like, please, even if you want to who wants to live on the streets? Who wants to, like, the poverty and people looking at you the way they do, and not having enough to eat, and not knowing what the next day has, and having to live with the unknown, and coupled with the psychosis and all the other negatives that come on that. Get the hell out of here. They all want to be better. It's just, the circumstances haven't risen to afford the proper chance. And it's multiple chances, right? They all want that. It's just a sliding scale of just availability and all the things coming together at the same time, and a support network. People forget one of the best elements of recovery is having somebody like an accountability person there with you. They leave that out when you're on the streets alone by yourself with all this other stuff going on. There's nobody else there with you.
Right. It's very lonely.
It's very lonely. It's sad.
Yeah. I think folks stick together when they are kind of in groups. They're sticking together for survival. I think a lot of
probably not because they like each other.
I think a lot of the problematic, quote unquote, behaviors that we see from the homeless community, I think a lot of that stems from the survival instinct. Like, they're doing what they need to do to survive. I was driving down the street just the other day actually, going to the hospital to see somebody, and I saw a woman running across the street, and I could tell that she was probably homeless. She was carrying a bag, and her clothes looked pretty dirty, and her grooming wasn't the best. And so she was running to the bus stop. And I was like, she just wants to catch the bus, because I saw it behind me. So I was like, she's just rushing to catch the bus. No, she was rushing to the bus stop so she could lay down her stuff, pull her pants down, and just take a big old shit right on the ground. And I thought to myself, I was stuck at this red light watching this woman take a shit on the ground.
As you do.
Classic. And I was thinking, I was like, God, she's just legitimately trying to, like, survive. Like, she's just trying to shit. Like, that's the most basic, like, fundamental. And she was, like, just trying to find a comfortable spot to do that.
Right.
And it's the bus stop on the corner of Guadalupe and 45th.
Right.
You know? It's wild.
Learned a lot about you today, including what you're into. This is watching people. No, I'm kidding. I get it. I mean, I really do.
Yeah.
I get it. It's like that basic need. Like, what's more basic than your body's biological functions?
Right.
And people, businesses, private businesses, which quite frankly, they probably ought to have the ability to turn people away, but the public ought to probably have access to resources that are basic to that type of quality. Watching grandparents pass away is heartbreaking. I'm sure we've all seen it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they most desire are the humanity and decency and being viewed in that manner.
Being able to wipe their own ass.
And when you're shitting yourself in a bed and you can't do anything about it, that's real life right there. That's true human existence right there. And we all desire dignity and basic humanity in that regard. It's heartbreaking that we don't see each other like that. Mm-hmm. And here's the awful truth too. For instance, we have folks in Austin, they'll solicit on the side of the road, right? When you're in traffic, I mean, it's all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. They got signs. I love the people that come up with the funny signs, like my jet ran out of fuel or, stuff like that. It's pretty funny. It's cool. Nonetheless, I'll have people say, well, I used to give people water and sandwiches and all they want is beer and, they just need to go get a job. And a lot of people say stuff like that. Dirty truth is I lock my doors when I roll up like that. It's true. I'm just being real.
Yeah.
I'm just being real.
Sure.
And here's my reason. So I've had cases as a prosecutor where I had a guy that would like go up to cars and open the doors and snatch people's phones and wallets and stuff out of their cars. I prosecuted that guy. And one dude pulled a gun on him, right, when he was doing that. Yeah. And the guy took the gun and shot the dude with it.
Oh, snap. Did he die?
No. Oh. But that's fucked up, right? And I every time I think about people walking next to your damn car, I just think about somebody like opening my car door. Mm-hmm. It freaks me out. I don't like that.
Yeah. I guess
that doesn't mean I don't care for people in general.
Sure.
Or care for in the grand scheme, the plight of individuals in that circumstance. That just means that I got a little PTSD from not wanting to get, mugged in my own car.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm in the habit of always, I have a relatively new car, and this one actually locks, like the locks automatically lock when you go into gear. So my Ford truck used to do that. My current car does not. So you actually have to click.
Manually lock it. And then I'm always pissed because I'll park and I'm trying to get out of the car. Like,
right.
Why wouldn't this damn thing open?
Right. Yeah. So my car does it for me. But yeah, I mean, when I used to drive cars without power locks, I was in the habit of locking my doors. But I think probably for a variety of reasons, not necessarily like that homeless guy on the corner is going to come, harass me or something.
Can I also be real with you? I love a good entrepreneur. You know what I'm saying? Like the go-getter spirit. I like that. But, you know, people, when they come out and they start trying to wash your windows or they're trying to sell you a bottle of water or whatever, I don't trust you, man. Get away from my car.
So something really interesting when I see people washing windshields. My father was born and raised in Mexico, and so I still have a lot of family down there. And so we go down there, you know, a couple times a year maybe, and even more so when I was a kid. And I just remember growing up, and that's the thing. Like when I started seeing it in Austin when I got here, I was like, man, I thought that was like a Mexican thing. Like, I don't know. I'd only seen it when I was in Mexico visiting my family. But yeah, people wash windows. They'll sell fruit, you know, like walking down the median. And yeah, it's a very interesting thing because I would always watch my dad, how he would react. And it kind of, and this is like kind of terrible, but it depended on what kind of mood he was in. If he was in a good mood, he'd be like, all right. Like he would let him do a shitty wash job and then give him a couple bucks, right? But if he was in a bad mood, he would like be like, you know, shaking his hand like through the windshield. And sometimes the guy would stop and kind of walk off, but sometimes he wouldn't. He'd keep going. And then my dad would have to roll the window down and yell something profane. Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic you find yourself in with strangers sometimes, because that's a pretty intimate thing.
Being close to anybody is an intimate thing.
Yeah.
And safety is always something, I guess. Being exposed to violence and violent facts and things like that is always sort of in the back of my mind. Just being safe. And I don't think it's wrong to not want that contact. I think it's wrong if you don't want that contact because you think people like that are lesser. Or undeserving, or like if wherever your heart is with your decision there, you know. But if you don't want that because you are like an introvert and you don't like that contact, or you have a history with some of that stuff, and you're just like, I think you're perfectly okay in setting boundaries. I think people ought to set more boundaries probably, and be okay with setting those boundaries for the right reasons, but. It's the wrong reason boundaries that we have trouble with. And I also think, you know, grand arching here, theme here is, you know, what services can we provide for people to where they're not in a desperate position of doing some of that? Because some of the times, you know, the dirty truth of some of these neighborhoods, even in Austin, is that these people that, you know, the guy and the girl on the street corner, you know, the guy is going up and down, and he's also, you know, pimping out the girl that's at that corner to the right vehicle that comes along that knows those areas. Right. Like prostitution happens, and very frequently in Austin, in certain areas. Drug dealing happens in Austin in those areas, and the access and availability to that is very real. Sure. You know, people go to the Arch to buy drugs.
I hate that place.
Yeah.
Anytime one of my clients talks about going down there, I'm like, please don't go there. It's just a bad place.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
It is.
That is the community center and the options that we're trying to push people to, and to the point where it's so overrun that we're now wanting to go away from it.
I know.
What do we have to replace it with? Yeah.
Well, at this point, nothing really. I mean, the way things are right now.
A little bit closer to you.
Yeah, I think it's sad that that's the best we can offer our homeless folks.
Yeah. It is sad.
It's a rough place. I don't want to put the blame on the people, because like I said, I think a lot of people are just doing what they need to do to survive. I think systemically it's a problem, of course, but I think it's sad that's the best we can do.
Let me ask you this. Have you been to Mexico often? Mm-hmm. So where's your dad from?
Matamoros.
Oh, okay, so Brownsville.
Mm-hmm. I was born in Brownsville, yeah.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So that's where I was a prosecutor, was actually in Cameron County.
Oh, Cameron County.
Yeah. Carrizales, the jail there.
I was not familiar with the jails in
Brownsville. Never been there?
No, not as a 4-year-old.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit north, on the northeast side of town.
Okay.
And I, as a white guy, I lived in Rancho Viejo.
The big golf ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to, that was like my landmark. Like I knew I was getting close if we were driving from somewhere else.
Right.
Like, Rancho Viejo. Yeah.
So Matamoros is right across from Brownsville.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting. They got the plaza.
They do. My grandparents, well, they're both gone now, but our family home is still there. It's right down the street from the plaza. I love that place.
Only been once. What kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. Now, the interesting part about going out there and going down into Brownsville and Matamoros is there's not that much homelessness. There's poverty.
Absolutely.
Like really impoverished conditions.
Yeah.
A lot of families taking care of each other.
Right.
I think there's a unique difference.
The
Cultural difference.
Yeah.
Cultural difference of something like being out on the street and selling candy and chicles to cars as they pass by, and, like getting your car washed and that,
right.
versus big city metropolitan America.
Right.
It's like, get off my lawn mentality.
Yeah. Right. Well, most of those people, selling a windshield wash or cheekless or whatever, those people aren't necessarily homeless. That's just kind of their side hustle.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's a big difference.
Oh, the markets are fun.
Absolutely.
And awesome. And it's a community engagement.
Unless you have anxiety, then don't go because it's very overstimulating sometimes.
It really is.
Yeah.
and some of them are really good hustlers too.
Absolutely. They have to be, like I said, doing what they need to do to survive, right? Because a lot of those cities are, they rely a lot on tourists. So they have to kind of go out there and get them.
Yeah. I noticed that at least juxtaposed against like Austin, Dallas, Houston, where I've been, that the style of homelessness is a little bit different, or poverty really.
Right.
Is what I should have said. Is a little bit different, and how they handle it as a familial versus a community effort.
Right.
And how does that interplay with your services? Like, let's say a competency restoration. Mm-hmm. If you can put somebody in a home with a family, what kind of resources do you give the family?
There's NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, I believe. They are you familiar with Al-Anon?
No.
So you're familiar with AA?
Yes.
So Al-Anon is the equivalent for family members.
Okay.
Of alcoholics, right?
Yeah.
So
I have heard of that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking, my mind was in acronym soup related to mental health.
Yeah.
And I'm with you.
All very closely related, I know. Yeah. So NAMI offers like family support groups. So it's pretty much like Al-Anon, but focused on mental health, like people who have family members who are mentally ill and how to best support them in that. That's the main one that comes up off the top of my head. Depending on what kind of insurance coverage they have, we can provide other referrals for like family counseling and things like that. But it tends to be very individualized, as it should, but because of the logistics, like, like what kind of coverage a person has kind of dictates what their options are. So.
Gosh, when you talk about counseling, the sarcasm goes off in my head. It's like, you mean if you just giving drugs doesn't fix people?
I love drugs. Yeah. I think psychotropic medications is a wonderful element to treatment. I don't think it's a complete treatment.
Yeah.
I think that it needs to be combined with counseling, with wraparound services, and just, a good support network takes you a long way too.
I love drugs too. You and I, we're going to go do a little drugs, probably listen to some Pink Floyd, and then afterwards we'll talk about our feelings.
Sure.
So we'll do the whole circle of treatment.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, counseling is an exceptionally important part of that. I think people like need to address where they are, what's going on,
and where they've been.
Yeah.
A lot of our folks have been victimized over and over and over again, and often don't have either the intellectual or emotional capacity to process that, because they're focusing so much on surviving that day. Yeah. You know, when you're homeless, you don't have time to think about like, man, the effects that, my mother beating me when I was a child. Like, what is that having on me today? Like, you don't have the time to think about that. It's just, it becomes very internalized, and yeah, it's awful. Trauma is terrible.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It is terrible and interesting. What I got to kind of thinking about when we were talking about just now was how many instances I've seen in my male clients where they've been victims of sexual abuse as children, males being victims of sexual abuse. And I don't know what the corollary or like what that history has created in them to either make them more open to criminal conduct or susceptible to the circumstances that got them to where they are and the mental health. There's no real way to necessarily know, other than to, when you peel that onion back, like it's really ugly, and you see some you hear some really terrible things about that. Yeah. And then I got to thinking about the fact that, we were talking about earlier that there are prosecutors and judges and probation and pretrial people that do genuinely have a heart for people that have been through terrible circumstances and have issues, right?
Yeah.
But the hardest part about relaying that information to them is saying things like, my client was sexually abused as a child. Mm-hmm. And suddenly the prosecutor is there saying, oh, really? Well, did they report it? Do you have any documentation to support that claim? Right. Or are you just trying to tug at my heartstrings because he doesn't want to go to prison? Yeah. And all of a sudden we are now being in the flip position of saying, how do I support this accusation that my client is saying occurred to them to help them strategically in their current predicament?
Do you think it's as valuable to say something like more vague or general as opposed to like pinpointing my client was sexually abused? Like, my client's exhibiting a lot of post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms, right? So my client has experienced, extensive trauma and is having a hard time dealing with that or something. You know what I mean? Because then I feel like it's not as specific. Oh, well, did you report that thing? It's like, no, like that's just humanhood. That's just being a person, is like having trauma in your past. Some of us are able to manage better on a daily basis, and some of us aren't. And some of us, it becomes pathological, where it's diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Where you're not able to function appropriately.
Yeah. Because of that. I think those types of diagnoses are helpful. Sure. I've had clients where they get caught in, for instance, we talked about how hard probation is. So when they violate probation, oftentimes they'll get locked up while you figure out whether or not they'll continue on probation, or they might go to prison or jail or whatever it is, or do some kind of in-custody treatment or corrective classes, right? Love that.
Is that what they call them?
Corrective. So, for instance, SAFE-P, which is the Substance Abuse Facility program. I can never remember what it's. SAFP.
I don't know what it stands for, but I know SAFE-P. Yeah.
Anyways, sorry. Got me thinking about what the damn acronym stand for. It's too many today. You got me you have literally fried my. We don't even need drugs anymore. My brain is fried. Just turn on the Pink Floyd. So they'll go to SAFE-P, and one of the components of it is substance abuse. Yep. Right.
Like a big component of it, right?
The other is cognitive.
Oh, right. CBT or something.
Corrective cognitive courses. I don't think but it's cognitive.
Sure.
Learn how to think better.
Yeah. Differently.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that goes to people with that anti-personality issue.
Yeah, you can't cure that, unfortunately.
Well, but they'll put you in a facility where you have to go to classes and participate, or you might come out of it having violated a condition of your probation and then go to prison because you didn't go through it.
And if you truly have antisocial personality disorder, you'll know that, and you'll play the game if you need to get what you want.
Sure.
So that doesn't apply to a lot of the folks that are in there, I think, that are, I don't know how to describe that. Cognitive therapy, I think, is great because it changes the way you think. It changes the way you think about consequences to things. So it prompts you to think before you act, which I think is like a really valuable life skill.
Yeah.
That all of us may not have possessed at some point, So that coupled with other forms of substance use treatment, I think can go a long way.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I find that like some of these forced classes are interesting in the dynamic of an individual with some of these mental health issues.
Do you know CCRP is a forced class, though? We're court ordered.
Really?
People don't come to us because they want to.
Sure. Well, no, I mean, like the one specifically, the client you and I had, that was court ordered for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah, and I mean, and had that not been done, client would have been back in jail.
Yeah.
And maybe in prison.
Probably so.
Probably,
Yeah.
especially that charge.
Yeah, it was a big one.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
So there really is a lot of weight on their shoulders to complete those things. People on probation, for instance, they'll go out and they'll be required to do all these classes and required to do treatment, right? Especially if they're on the mental health docket. I just continued a client today that's on the mental health docket. And one of their conditions to continue is to get a full evaluation of their mental health issues because we didn't have it. And so we're going back and forth like, well, I'm pretty sure they have these specific things going on, but we don't really have any actual diagnosis. Right. So we don't even know if he's really ought to be in the mental health. I'm like, well, what the hell? Like, what kind of circle are we going around here for 4 months in custody, going back like, oh, well, I think we'll just send him to Safe P. We'll just put him in lockup for a year, and that'll set him straight. The person had an issue with anxiety and being around groups. Yeah. And substance abuse was definitely an issue, but mental health was also a big issue of that. And so here's another interesting thing. In Texas, we have it's illegal to use drugs. Did you know that? I
didn't.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Okay.
I know you were telling me earlier that you were doing, but some of that you can't do.
I gotta watch out. Yeah.
And so we will gauge your punishment based on the amount of the drugs that you have.
Yeah, it's like grams, right? Like
in grams.
Like
it's actually
or over.
Like a first degree, which is like 5 to 99 years or life in prison, and oftentimes can be a very little amount of drugs. Like for methamphetamine especially, or crack cocaine, things that have dilutants added to them, or the number one terrible capital offense of marijuana brownies.
I knew you were going to go there.
Where you can have one brownie in Texas gets you a felony if it's over a certain amount.
Do they weigh it?
They weigh it. They weigh it, including the chocolate, the delicious chocolate that goes along with it. Oh yeah, some of the fudge brownies my family makes.
Dense.
Yeah, and then you add the weed. Man,
it's a brick.
Talking about life in prison kind of good brownies. So they judge you by the weight. Another interesting part about that is that they will also change the name of the offense. So sometimes possession can be possession with the intent to deliver, or manufacture and delivery. Yeah. Some of these monikers get added to the charged offense by virtue solely of the weight. There's not always an element that they are actually the drug dealer.
Right.
But they will get this, and it's on their record. And so these people, do you think it's a good idea to put a drug dealer in a group therapy class full of drug users? Just going out on a limb, good or bad? Just what's your temperature?
My gut reaction is probably no, but it's complicated.
Yeah, who's to say they're the dealer, right? Or couldn't benefit from the therapy?
Exactly.
But then again, if my client, the actual user that could benefit, and you're putting them in the damn tank with the shark.
But maybe the shark wants to change. I don't know.
Or have new clients.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Can't trust anybody.
How do you know? how do you know anything?
Well, you hopefully, if you're working directly with people, you build rapport and you're able to kind of be able to read them a little bit better. But some people will just lie straight to your face. All the time happens to me. All the time. I'm sure you too.
Yeah.
People just
So
lie straight to your face.
I've had clients explain to me like mental health. They're going through issues of mental health. It's kind of like being in the Matrix. And so like they're glitches, right? And the things like are going along fine. They think it's totally fine. And then like a glitch will happen and so that glitch will just set everything off in a catastrophic way.
Yeah.
That you know, they're at work and then just something happens and they observe something that clearly didn't happen, or have this like overwhelming wave of emotions attached to an otherwise unassuming conduct by some other person, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then all of it goes down and just topples downhill.
Yeah.
Just that little glitch, that little one moment in time, one word, one conversation. And it's really interesting because you know, also they use the red pill and the blue pill in the Matrix. And I've also had clients tell me that one of the worst parts of going through the process of like being evaluated and all of this is you'll have doctors tell you to take one thing. Some doctor tell you to take another. Some doctor give you too much to where they don't feel like a human.
Right.
I've tell people that they say that they feel like they're just zonked out zombies.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
And then, you know, they want to feel something, right? And so then they get engaged in poor conduct. The medical science is not perfect.
It's an art.
It's an art that's costly. Yeah. And art, you know, I have some friends with children, you know, that you put out the coloring books. Some art's just not good. Sorry, friends.
I don't care how cute your kid is.
Art book, they suck. They're terrible. I mean, they might be somebody someday. You know, it might be Picasso, but probably not. Maybe just suck at art. You know, and maybe there are doctors out there that just suck at doctoring. You know what I'm saying? And if their clientele are all poor people and in impoverished areas, and the only people that are paying them are grant-funded associations and it's low level, and they came out of like doctor school with debt, and this is the only doctor job they could get, and they're just like, well, I mean, I don't know, take this, goodbye.
Get out of my face.
Do you think that happens? It happens with lawyers. You don't think it happens with doctors?
I'm sure it does.
I know it does. I know these. I mean, they're just like, I don't know. Try this.
Yeah. Well, and they're expected to see so many people a day that you don't have the time. There's not enough time in the day to spend the time that's needed to really provide quality care.
For sure. And like any nonprofit. Any nonprofit, and let's have a real conversation about this. It's all about the numbers. Hypothetically, nonprofits that are not integral care might benefit from jacking up numbers of services performed for purposes of applying for grants. So you might have somebody come in that's like, I have mental health issue A, B, and C. And you're like, would you like some water? Because we can check off grant number 1 for providing you water. And if you stay for 2 hours, we can provide you counseling because the lady behind the desk said that you look nice today and it made you feel good, which is like counseling. So we checked that box. And then we told you to go across the street, which is an outside the box resource offering, which is another box that we can check for purposes of grant. You're looking like that has never happened. You've never heard of this.
I have no idea. But I stepped out. Are you still talking?
Oh, yeah.
I took a break.
Because grants have nothing to do with agencies like yours, and they're never misused.
You know, it's out of my pay grade to know stuff like that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't think you have any opinion on this one way or another. And nor am I insinuating that integral care does any of this. But there are programs apparently out there that do that.
Somewhere in the world, I'm sure, yeah.
And it's unfortunate because these people need resources.
Absolutely.
And the grants and funding and community wealth that's placed into them, there's a certain amount of trust that money is going to be spent well and done well with it. And the other ugly truth about a lot of these agencies is y'all aren't really like sexy. what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I talk about this a lot.
Are they meant to be, though?
Well, here's what I'm saying. I talk about this a lot. This is kind of like I have a lot of heartache about this because, hold on, look, I mean, I give to charity. I'm like on a board of a nonprofit. I care. Oh, wow. You know, I do. I try. Yeah. Right? You know, dabble a little of this, a little bit of that. It's really just for my ego. It has nothing to do with my heart or how I care for people whatsoever. It's all about ego. Sure. Nonetheless, what I've seen is, especially working in criminal justice, is that there are people out in the world who are like, well, this issue is morally uncomplicated and easy to give my money to, right? It's like, I love puppies.
Yeah.
Money to puppies.
How can you argue against giving money to puppies?
Homeless person defecating in Guadalupe in the alley behind the bathroom. I don't know that I want to give my money to you.
Yeah.
You are morally complicated.
But it is complicated.
Not sexy.
Puppy's very sexy, though.
Yeah. Although that's what you were looking at. So yeah, for some people, maybe it is sexy. I don't know. The point is that there are certain black holes of fundings that people don't want to give to, don't care about. They're blights, right? And we're just trying to like cover it up and move on to the next thing. As long as it's not in the main thoroughfare of what makes our town money and brings in more money, because it's all about money. Long pause.
I think then we come back to the whole argument of having the arch in the middle of the Red River District, right?
Yeah. On one hand, it's really interesting as a social project to like put that right in the middle. You know what I'm saying?
Do you think someone did that on purpose? Like,
I don't know.
Let's just see how this goes.
I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they're like, you know what? We should pay attention to and see every day so that reminds us of how good our lives are and
I will say
how good we got it.
I will say the arch has been there for a while.
Yeah.
The entertainment district around it has built up around it. Like I actually, my first experience with that area, I was like 17 years old. I was driving my stepdad's Jeep Cherokee. It was a piece of crap. And it backfired. And it created this huge cloud of smoke. And I was like right in front of the arch. And I got a lot of mean things said to me by people
really?
Who were mad. Yeah, because I blew this whole thing of smoke in their space, right?
Right.
So the point is, it's been there for a long time, and I mean, I don't know what else to say about that.
I feel like on one hand, it's good that it's out in the open, that it's something that people know in the community. Certainly, Travis County and Austin specifically, the arch and under the highways in that area, like that's there. I was made aware by virtue of a newspaper article that some of the businesses in the entertainment district had kind of gathered together and started providing resources. Like, I have no idea what resources they actually provide other than bottles of water, which was put in the article that we hand out bottles of water. We came together as multi-million-dollar organizations and we said, you know what we can give you? A bottle of water. Yeah. I can't imagine what else they could possibly give to the issue. Nonetheless, there has been a lot of talk about, that area, sure. Which I think they are more incentivized for other reasons about gathering together about that issue. Yeah. But that's interesting. Yeah. I don't think there is a right answer for how to address it. I think there ought to be more of a conversation about compassion and dignity. But my God, it is kind of hard to act in a compassionate way, in a one-on-one way, going down there, one of the things that bugs me on my ride home is that there's a guy that I've seen for the last couple of weeks. They kind of move in patterns, but I've seen him in the last couple of weeks in the area, and he's just like yelling out into nowhere land. Really? I'm not going to walk up and be compassionate. I'm sorry.
He's probably really seriously ill.
Yeah, for sure, and scary. That's scary.
Yeah.
And I love intervention. I don't know if 311 will get him there. Like what do you do for that? What do you like? What's the resource?
Integral Care's MCOT teams.
Tell me about MCOT. So they'll do evaluations before release. Like they can put people in respite. They can do some.
No. Don't tell anyone that I told you that, because that is not true.
No, you didn't tell me that. I have a client that was flagged for MCOT. Yep. and an evaluation for respite upon
Yes.
release from jail.
Yes.
You didn't tell me that.
No, I didn't.
That's a different
Okay.
exchange.
Yeah, right. So MCOT, the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team, and EMCOT, the extended MCOT. And again, I don't work for these programs, so I don't know the ins and outs, but I know in general, specific to folks getting out of custody, right? When they're released from jail, they can be flagged for an evaluation by MCOT. And if they meet certain criteria, they would be eligible for a bed at a respite facility if one's available. So the admission process is still complicated. It's not as complicated as getting someone involuntarily committed. You don't need, like, there's no order of protective custody or anything like that. It's a psychosocial assessment, safety assessment. But yes, MCOT are the ones that they go out there and evaluate folks wherever they are. I feel like I have seen an increase of collaboration between integral care and APD, which
I was going to say APD will see those individuals and get them connected to services. And they do a good job of that. I was sort of surreptitiously setting that up in that direction.
They do. I think
there are some really good officers out there that deal with mental health issues. Although the University of Texas just came out with a study that said Austin was one of the worst in the state with dealing with the issues. What? Do you see that burn?
No, I didn't.
Big time burn. Yeah, I mean, because there have been an inordinate amount of handling mental health issues with less than lethal and lethal force.
I mean, I cannot say I'm surprised, but I think that we're getting better.
For sure.
Are we good? No, probably not. But are we getting better? Yes.
Statistics are rarely good for anything, in my honest opinion. Unique facts and individual people speak volumes about characters and qualities of our conduct in our community.
Yeah. So statistics are good for, like, flexing on people when you're like, look what I know.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I think MCOT's great. I think those services are really valuable to be able to go meet somebody where they're at in need, literally location-wise, meet them in their time of need.
Absolutely. It cuts down on a lot. It de-escalates a lot of the time because getting in the back of a cop car, getting handcuffed, because it's traumatizing, right? Being arrested is traumatizing. It's not de-escalating.
Have you ever been arrested? Oh, you don't have to answer that. I've been detained.
What's the difference?
So being detained is like you're placed in handcuffs. I was pulled out of my car, put in handcuffs, put on the side of the road.
Why?
So you want to hear the whole shebang?
I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours.
Quid pro quo. Wow. I feel like you're okay. Talk about flexing on me. Okay. All right. So I was young, just graduated high school and hanging out with some guys that were up to no good.
Okay.
Started making trouble in my neighborhood. Got in one little car, drove down the road, saw a guy that I shouldn't know. He pulled out in front.
Okay.
And I pulled out in front of him. And we raced down the highway.
Oh, Lord.
And then we turned down the road and pulled in the parking lot. Out came the cops and all that whatnot.
Like drag racing?
Not really.
Or just like
seriously,
street racing?
Seriously, the guys in my car were, I think, like flicked him the bird or something, and he flicked us the bird back. Okay, I didn't know the guy. Literally didn't know the kid, and he pulls in front of me, like cuts me off, and I drive around to him and slam my brakes off.
That's
right, like fuck you.
childish.
Of course, I was a child. I was 18 years old. I was a child, so whatever. And he pulls out in front of me again, turns the road, and we had followed him. I mean, this was like right in sequence, and we were actually going that way. We were going bowling.
Of all things, how wholesome.
Yeah, no kidding,
Wow.
right? Yeah, and then afterwards we were going to mainline some PCP, but it was bowling first, and then so we're going bowling, and we pull in this parking lot, really nondescript parking lot from what I remember. Like didn't see any, and like all these cops pour out of it. Like 8 cops pour out of this building.
Sure.
And they are mad at me, not at the other kid, me. And so like guns drawn, no shit.
Oh my God, on you?
Pull me and my 3 friends out of the car, handcuffs, on the side, put us on the side of the road on the sidewalk. On a lot of traffic on this road, 2 big thoroughfares, and they literally empty my car out, just toss my car.
Find all your chicken nuggets.
Yeah,
all your joints, I'm sure.
Right, a whole lot of receipts for Wendy's Frosties, because I was a fat kid, and like some drumsticks and like some Metallica CDs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was pretty much their booty.
Some Nag Champa, perhaps.
yeah, exactly. Some tub thumping, and maybe a 311 CD. Oh and God. So I'm on the side of the road, and they're like, "Punk kid, motherfucker, you think you're all tough, and then at the end, I just shut the fuck up, which at that point in time, probably the writing was on the wall with what I should become. And this story gets a little bit more interesting. Sorry, I'll wrap it up. But so I'm on the side, I just shut the fuck up. And they end up writing me a ticket for driving on the wrong side of the road, a traffic ticket.
Were you driving on the wrong side of the road?
Well, that's the question. That's the $1 million question. And the other kid just drives off, and I'm like, what the fuck just happened here? Okay. I'm in handcuffs. My car gets tossed, and this kid just drives off. I'm like, at the very least, he did it too. You know what I'm saying? Right? What's going on?
Yeah.
And where did all these cops come from? So lo and behold, we pulled into the police department parking lot. And when I went to court for my ticket, I took it all the way to trial by jury.
Oh my God.
18 years old, represented myself. There's a prosecutor.
Stop.
We picked a jury, 6 people, the judge, the whole 9 yards, right? I represented myself. 2 cops' names were on the speeding ticket. So I filled out the local subpoena form that they had in the court, and the 2 cops showed up. And the book that I had read on like how to, because this is like pre-internet. Well, this is like internet age, but we're talking like 56K modem. Everybody has their own AOL AIM account. AOL, you know what I'm saying? Like we were at the birth of so there's not a whole lot of info on this. I bought a book from Barnes & Noble, like how to fight a traffic ticket. So go in there reading the book, and it's like, if the cops come, well, that's probably not good, but you try to play chicken, see if they don't show up, whatever. So sure enough, they come up, and I'm like, okay, all right, 2 cops. They definitely didn't see me do this traffic infraction. So what I'm going to do is, so the cop gets on the stand, and I take a butcher block piece of paper that was sitting in the courtroom. And I'm like, this is perfect. I had a piece of paper I was going to make him write, but I took the butcher block out, and I said, how was I driving on the wrong side of the road? And so he takes a marker out, and he draws these 2 roads, and here's my car and how I drove on the wrong side of the road. And then the other cop comes out, and I flip the butcher paper down, and new piece of butcher paper, and I go, how was I driving on the wrong side of the road? He drew a completely different picture of how I was supposed to have done that.
Yeah.
And I was like, ladies and gentlemen, is it A or B? I don't know. How can you convict me on this?
Wow.
Right? And so they come back in like 5 minutes, not guilty. And this guy in the back stands up and he goes, this is bullshit. And he's wearing a uniform, and he's got a bunch of stars on his shirt. Ooh. The kid in the other car was the son of the chief of police.
Stop.
Not kidding. So the judge, he was like, son, can you come here? And we went back in his chambers. He goes, that was pretty impressive. Are you on the debate team? And I was like, no, I'm a total loser, sir. I have no business being in here. And he's like, no, that was really good. But I have some really good advice. Never come back to the city again, because you pissed off a lot of people. And I was like, yes, sir. Just, I'll be leaving now. I'll be gone. I'm out. Goodbye. So I was detained, but not arrested. So they investigated a crime, chose not to arrest me.
That story, I think, is more.
And that's how I became a lawyer.
Exactly.
No, that first jury trial at 18 years old.
Yeah, that's like less like tell me your arrest story and more like let me tell you how I became a lawyer, because that's awesome. Yeah. Good job.
Thank you. I took advantage of the system. Yeah. It's a real humble beginnings, rise to the top kind of character story, character building.
It's an important part of any story.
Okay. All right, so you're hustling blow on the side of the road, and cops see your tattoos and your nefarious friends, and you're You're probably like snapping your fingers and like.
You're making me sound infinitely cooler than I am.
Okay.
It was definitely not that cool. I was on my way to a first date, actually. And
how old?
it wasn't my first date. It was my first date with that person.
Okay.
I think I was like 21.
It's like never been kissed. Okay, all right.
So I was on my way to a date, and I was driving a car that was mine. I had it. It was a piece of crap. It was it was a hand-me-down from my mom. So when she passed away, I got kind of stuck with her car, which at the time was kind of a blessing because I had been taking the bus for like a few years. So I was like, cool, I have this car. It's awesome. It was like this like old Mercedes. But it was a piece of shit, and it would not pass an inspection. And so my stickers were super expired. And so I over the course of a couple years, got like a handful of tickets, right, for having an expired inspection sticker. Back in the day when we had 2 stickers, not just one.
For you kids out there on your iPads.
I know. There used to be 2 stickers on our cars.
Mom and Pa used to have to go get your car inspected for all the leaky, gassy stuff, and then you had to pay the government to put another sticker on your car because you were paying taxes. Wasting plastic, which is now in our ocean.
All of them, I'm sure. Wow. Thank you for making me think that. I'm going to be thinking about that all weekend now.
Yeah, your carbon footprint is
it's huge,
Bigfoot.
I'm sure. Yeah. I drove a Prius for a couple years. Does that count?
Yeah. You can't roll back that kind of evil.
Anyways, so I got pulled over. I got tagged. I had a cop behind me, and I was pulling out of my neighborhood, and I was not far away from my neighborhood at all. When I saw his lights come up, and I was like, I know I wasn't speeding. So he pulls me over, and he tells me there was a warrant out for my arrest, and I immediately start crying. So I'm terrified at this point, right? I tend to catastrophize, so I'm thinking like in the future, like all the things that are going to happen because of this one moment. And
my partner has that ability to cry.
Really?
Just like not Jason. Well, he does too. But my other partner, just like
yeah.
Just
it was
command.
It was like real tears, though. I was genuinely scared. So he tells me I have a warrant out for my arrest, and that it's for unpaid tickets for the expired inspection and the registration. I was 21. I was poor. I was in community college. I was working in Thundercloud Subs. Like I didn't
trying to get by.
I didn't make a lot of money, So I couldn't afford the repairs that the car needed to pass an inspection. So I just kind of kept racking up these tickets. So I'm crying, and then he tells me my car is going to be impounded, and then of course I'm like, oh my god, this is like a whole nother like catastrophe, right? And I think, bless him wherever you are, I think that officer had a lot of mercy on me because he also probably had a lot to do with the fact that I look white, I think, and I was like a young girl, but he let me call my brother to come pick up my car so it wouldn't be impounded. So, of course, I'm in handcuffs behind my back, so I can't dial my phone. So the cop gets my phone, and I tell him my brother's number, and he calls my brother. And I'll never forget this, because to this day, this was like almost 10 years ago, my brother's like, this cop called me, and he's asking me if I'm the brother of Mia Maraboto, and he's like, oh my God, is she dead? Like, where is she, right?
Yeah.
And so my brother came and picked up the car, which was amazing, and I got booked. I got taken the back of the car and downtown, and they made me take out all my body jewelry, and I got a chance to write down a couple phone numbers out of my phone for my phone call, right? But they're
pretty good about letting people do that. It's very kind. Actually is. As unfair as it feels about getting arrested, but
there are like little glimmers here and there. Yeah. But yeah, I spent the night in the freezing cold like central booking like area. I wasn't I was not in like a personal cell or anything. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's not as exciting as Blow. You should work some Blow into that.
I know.
Story.
I should really remake the story. Oh, actually, best part of the story is the poor guy who's waiting on me at our date. The next morning when I get released, of course I have to be at work in like 4 hours. So I'm like trying to hustle, like getting back over there. So I'm not even thinking about it, but I check my phone later, my voicemails, and there's like 5 from him.
No.
And like we're supposed to meet at like 10. The first one's at like 10:30, and he's like, "Oh, I'm here, just like checking in." The next one's at like 11:30, and he's like,
So
hey.
he totally thinks you stood him up.
Yeah.
Which you totally did.
I did.
This is an extravagant story to tell just because you stand some dude up on the first date.
Yeah, he waited for hours. Like the last voicemail was like past 1:30.
Did y'all ever go? Did you go on a second date?
Never again. No.
Wow, he gave you one chance.
It was a sign.
You're a criminal.
Yeah, it was a sign.
I can see why you did that. You're a criminal.
Obviously. Yeah. He wrote me off. I think he's married now, so somewhere.
And you've been in the jail, so you
really
can't give blood
successful.
now too. So.
Actually, you know what? I can give blood.
Yeah, it's after a certain amount of time, which is interesting because I go to the jail all the time. Can't give blood.
I can't donate plasma because I have too many tattoos.
Really?
Yeah. So they ask you, because again, back in the day, broke, looking for some quick cash, right? I was like, I'll sell my bodily fluids. So I went to go donate plasma. And yeah, they ask you how many piercings you've had and how many tattoos you've had. So each one is a different needle, so it puts you at a higher risk of infection. So
that's an absurd way to calculate it because I can't imagine how many actual needles went into my tattoos.
Well, right, because if they're big, like that's multiple sessions, multiple needles, right? So I didn't even go into all that, but I was like, this is one, this is two,
right.
And I still had too many.
Well, you see, my black and gray artist uses a shading needle that has like up to 5 on the gun at any particular time. Then we were switching out, and then I did 9 sessions.
And then he switched with the guy next to me. I don't know. Yeah, it's wild. But I'm banned from, and you know what? You know what's messed up? And I remember thinking about this, and I remember thinking, God, I'm kind of an asshole. I was walking out after they banned me, and have you ever hung out at like a plasma donation center?
I have. I've given plasma before.
Okay. What kind of people are at a plasma donation center?
Typically very sick people.
How? Sick how?
Like, so the place that I went had like multiple things set up. Like there was like a, my recollection of it was a lot of people were on dialysis at the center that I went to.
So these are people like receiving plasma.
Yeah.
What about the other donors?
Oh, I can't. Geez, I can't remember. It was in Houston, 2009. That was the last time.
Okay.
I'm a terrible person. Last decade.
So you weren't doing it for the money. You were doing it for the humanitarian, like the benefit of the people.
I was.
That's nice of you.
Yeah. One and done though.
Just once.
I'm keeping all my plasma. Suckers.
You keep your orange juice. It's fine.
Yeah. I can't remember why.
It's not a point anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm over it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
No, I just remember being offended that they didn't like want my plasma.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with me? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and every tattoo studio I've been to is like really clean. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can understand that there might be places that aren't.
Sure.
And that and I've seen some tattoo work that was not done probably in a sterile environment, or maybe it was, and just as an avant-garde artist, I don't know what you're into. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, like all the places I've gone to is like super clean, super well done. Take very good care and pride in what they're doing and cleanliness, and I don't know. Can't imagine. It's just one of those archaic stereotypes that still exists for people.
Yeah.
Do you see that with regards to people that are getting services, that people that have like the tattoos or the piercings?
What about them?
Like that they are subject to less than
I see.
the treatment that somebody without that would otherwise have been provided.
Honestly, I think out of all the disadvantages that are stacked up against them, mental illness tops them all.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of being mentally ill, I think that casts the largest stigma on them than tattoos.
But I'm even saying like the people that are providing the care. Y'all aren't like just totally blindfolded to stigma, stereotypes, and bias. I mean, there are people that they're just like, yeah, I was going to be a postal worker, but now I work in a clinic and people give blood and do weird things, and I give them medication.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think the majority of the people in my field have entered the field because they believe in people and want to help people.
Yeah.
So hopefully that bias is minimal compared to like the general public. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I'd like to be that too, but I also know a bunch of assholes I work with. It's just human nature.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think there's some talk about like clients' behaviors a lot.
Yeah.
More so than oh, he was smoking on the patio. We're just not supposed to smoke at our facility. Our facility is tobacco free, as is all integral care properties. And so
Did you hear that, you dirty nasty tobacco loving freaks?
I mean, out of all the things we handle,
what about snooze? Can I snooze on your property?
No, tobacco free.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bigots.
No vapes either.
Can't handle my tobacco.
My
spitless.
We're trying to promote healthy living for everyone.
Smokeless tobacco.
Our motto, healthy living for everyone, I think is actually our actual motto.
Really?
Yeah. So, we're doing it for you.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's really good. I do think that's important when you are in the community and you stand for something. Like it's hard to, especially for instance, AA is something that comes to my mind. I've had a lot of clients go in and out of that, and a lot of them pick up smoking, and so AA is okay with that.
Sure.
In large part,
right?
Because it's better than the alternative, right? So there's a lot of that better than the alternative thing.
Coffee, yeah.
And I think coping mechanisms and self-care are things that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
Right? Like my self-care is like watching football game, drinking beer, and I love that's not selfish, it's self-care.
Yeah, sure.
And I didn't learn that through any education or schooling. There's a sign on 6th Street when I drive in, and it tells me funny things, but today it told me self-care is not selfish. So,
it said that?
Yeah.
The sign did?
I don't remember where that is.
Oh.
Is that El Arroyo? Is that the sign?
Oh, the marquee sign.
Yeah, it always has the funny, something funny.
Sure, yeah.
Today was not funny. They spoke to me.
Yeah, it was deep.
Deep truth.
El Arroyo's getting real heavy over here.
Self-care is not selfish.
Wow. That's true.
Those are things that people don't really address.
Yeah. I think that's something that mental health professionals have gotten a lot better at doing amongst each other. Because we teach these skills to our clients, right? We teach our clients living skills, coping strategies, things like that. But the whole idea of burnout, right, among social workers in the mental health field, I think we're getting a lot better at taking care of each other and making sure everyone's taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
So like really promoting self-care to avoid. It's called compassion fatigue.
Oh yeah. I believe it.
Formerly known as burnout. Yeah.
Why not burnout?
I don't know. I guess just like MHMR, it's just kind of rebranding the more positive euphemisms, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how we try to reclassify and rebrand for purposes of positivity. I think that's really what we're getting at if you like try to break it open and call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Our facility is tobacco free. We don't prohibit smoking. Mm-hmm. We're free.
You're not going to judge somebody that does smoke or chooses to smoke. I mean,
oh no, we're definitely going to do that because it's against
the
rules.
You wouldn't judge.
Well, we don't judge them. Sure. But we do tell them.
You would help them in an understanding, compassionate way that this perhaps is not the best mechanism for coping.
And then we order them to hand over their cigarettes, and we walk them to the nurse's station that provides nicotine gum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and patches.
Like when you say force, are you like using Krav Maga? No. You flip them down onto the tile. They're like, hand me your cigarettes.
To make this really clear, there's no physical contact at all. Yeah. No, we ask
Just
them.
use your Jedi mind skills. It's like, these are not the sticks you want to smoke.
Some people are more agreeable than others. Some people refuse to give it, and that's we can't force it from their possession. So, but we do ask them for it. And then cigarettes, like things like that, cigarettes and lighters, things that are legal, are returned to them when they're discharged.
What about illegal stuff? What do you do with that?
I think most of it gets destroyed.
But you don't rat them out? You don't like call the cops on them?
Oh, no. Mm-mm. No.
I can imagine that happens actually a lot. They probably don't even know that they have some stuff on them.
Yeah.
In some instances. Or they have needles that have like... What people don't understand is that like needles will still have residual drugs in them, and any possession whatsoever, it's going to be less than a gram. It's still matter.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And even trace is still illegal. Now, whether or not the prosecuting officers choose to charge that or not doesn't preclude any officer from arresting people for it,
Yeah.
Especially if they think they have a good reason to.
Sure. Makes sense.
I think that's a great service. The competency restoration in the community, I think, is one of these programs that speaks volumes to the issue at hand, which is that we don't really know how to handle these people that are in active crisis.
Right.
Because clearly an incompetent individual is in active crisis. That's how I view it.
Okay, fair enough.
Help change my mind. But if they aren't competent, I think we all want to get them there, because I think the underlying idea is that competency is the baseline of where everybody should be. That's what the word is supporting.
Right. And
so if you're not there,
there's
something wrong.
Sure.
If there's something wrong, that's a crisis, because I think why I say that is because if you're not there, the collateral consequences associated with that are really, really bad.
Okay. Meaning
you're going to stay in lockup.
Okay.
Right? Or that you could be committed.
Sure.
Right? And that's something we haven't actually touched on yet.
Yeah.
Is the commitment, because simply because you are found incompetent to stand trial, so we've preponderance of the evidence. You don't have the present capacity to talk with your lawyer, and you don't understand the trial proceedings, right? So now you're incompetent. Now what?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
This is my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong. When someone's found incompetent to stand trial, they're put on a wait list for a forensic bed at a hospital, right? Like a state hospital, like Ash, or if the charge is serious enough, Vernon, up in, North Texas,
We
right?
only got two.
Huh?
We only got two.
Two what?
Ash and Vernon.
Montgomery County.
The county hospital?
Yeah.
Is a state-used facility?
They do forensic commitments there.
Like long-term ones or short-term ones?
I mean, like 60-day, 120-day.
I've never heard of Montgomery County.
Yeah.
Always heard Ash and Vernon.
I get this fancy report every week, and it tells me who's out at the facilities on 46Bs, and there's always a big stack of Montgomery County people.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Some people at Terrell, Kerrville, Big Spring.
So they're short-term.
I think they're shorter commitments. Yeah. So like 60-day, 120 days.
And the reason why I make it the distinguishment is because if you've been found incompetent, you are always in the queue to continue to receive services to become competent.
Yes.
It's not like the charges go away. Well, in some circumstances they do, if it's like a misdemeanor or nonviolent drug possession or something like that. Yeah. Or quite frankly, you are such a headache to the fiduciary value of the state, where we're like, do we really care? Yeah. Just get out of our jail. You cost us too much and we don't want to deal with you. Get out. Wow. Right? They do that a lot.
I don't know.
They do. I'm just telling you. But the short term is always, you keep them in the queue, get them competent, then resolve the case by trial or plea. Right. And get them back out of the taxpayer's pocket. Right. So those short-term facilities, I think, I might be wrong, but I think that's what we're really talking about. When we talk about insanity, when somebody is found not guilty by reason of insanity, then the civil commitment that kicks in is much more long-term. Right. It could be as long as the punishment range for the crime that they are alleged to have committed. Right. And some of that could be life, 20 years, 10 years, and then they're reevaluated for danger to society, and there's a whole nother queue of stuff involved with that, but it takes it out of the short-term stuff, whereas if you're found incompetent, there's 10-day turnarounds of information, 30-day turnarounds of information, and you're kept in this queue, always having to come back to court, which is terrible because it takes people out of their treatment. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that?
Well, so one perk of CCRP is court dates get reset. Our folks don't, 99% of the time in my experience, they have not been required to present in court until they've been reevaluated, restored, and need to show up in court to have that order signed.
Yes, and to be clear, this sort of program is unique. Like, not every county has this.
Correct.
And so Travis County is arguably a very liberal bastion for the purposes of applying pilot programs that are helpful in this regard. And so they're very aware of the complexities of travel and transportation, and would rather the person continue treatment as opposed to interrupting that treatment. Nonetheless, there are instances where they will compel the presence, and then an individual who's arguably in crisis, as my definition would.
Your definition
would do it. It makes it very difficult to take them out of the treatment cycle for purposes of having them show up, and might forfeit their bond because they didn't. But how did they actually know? Because they're incompetent. So can you require an incompetent person to show up to a court setting and then hold them accountable for not?
Can you require an incompetent person to sign a bond?
Yeah.
That was like a big thing, I remember, for a while. Because when people come to CCRP, they're being released from custody
on a promise to appear.
Well, yeah. I guess.
How can I make a promise? If I'm 16 years old, I can't go buy a car. I'm not competent. You have to have an adult.
Yeah.
Sign a contract. Yeah. The contract is void if I'm a child. How is any incompetent individual allowed to do that?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the point of, that's kind of the definition of incompetency, right? Is they don't have, the rational...
The capacity
right.
to make these decisions, right. Like an otherwise competent, rational person with a reasonable understanding might.
Reasonable understanding, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's as regards to talking to your lawyer.
Yeah.
I don't think that is like buying a car or a hamburger. Either way, it's still a contract. Nonetheless.
I gotta go. My meter's going to expire.
Yeah. I mean, your car's already been towed. Don't worry about it. The unpaid parking tickets.
Great.
And that blow we put in there for later. We still got to watch Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz with
some black lights, some sound off. I got some barbiturates and
my favorite.
Yeah, and mix it with a little bit of scotch. It's gonna be.
Oh my gosh.
It's gonna be wild.
Room temperature, please. Thank you.
Is there any other way?
I don't drink scotch. I don't know.
In Scotland, it's room temperature. They don't put ice in it.
Okay, I don't know scotch.
Bastardizing the scotch. I actually do like it with the ice in it. But, well, hey, thank you so much. This has been fascinating.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's elucidating, interesting.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's
illustrative,
new experience.
Yeah, entertaining.
Do you have your thesaurus out? Is that what you're doing now?
Huh?
Your thesaurus?
Yeah. So tell me real quick if you got any handle buys or anything like that, or any web addresses for your services. You want to just drop that stuff?
I mean, we're not really big on social media.
You should be.
I guess we should be.
For compassion for individuals.
I mean, there's the whole privacy of treatment, that whole thing.
Oh, you just be generic. Like today, self-care is important. Like El Arroyo.
We should have a.
Y'all should really take some points from El Arroyo.
That would be cool. No, I mean we're such a small and specialized program that we're by referral only. And
but if people just want to learn more about you or give to your organization, because y'all are tapped out on asking for so many grants, what's the website?
Integral Care's website is integralcare.org.
Integral Care. INTEGRALAUSTIN.
No, not Austin. Just integralcare.org.
Oh, I just put in that Austin part.
Yeah.
That's my readiness to go. I'm so sorry.
Projecting that.
Integral Care.
Integralcare.org.
Yeah. .org.
Mm-hmm. I think my program specifically has a very small little blurb on the much broader website. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's some kind of, I think it's probably whatever's at the top of this pamphlet that's on there. It's not much.
Great.
But yeah.
Do they pay you well? Do you need a raise? Should we ask for a raise?
Definitely could use a raise.
Yeah, I mean, it needs a raise. Anybody listening out there? You want to send that to her?
Thanks for that.
She has some unpaid parking tickets and a car to get out of impound.
Those bills rack up.
Yeah, they do.
Tough.
You never want to be arrested for something like that. It's embarrassing. You might miss out on Mr. Right.
Yeah, my husband would love that.
Honey, I got you because I was arrested that one time. It's meant to. That's a fairy tale story right there.
God bless the broken road.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thanks, Brian.
Awesome.